Welcome back from the weekend, friends. I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Jer Stays. We're pushing Detroit's conversation forward with an updated edition of Your Daily Detroit, recorded on Monday, May 20th, 2019. We'll jump right into it after this. Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by Milo. Milo is a marketing agency that produces amazing experiences for audiences.
They partner with their clients to drive business and create innovative content. Do cool stuff with them at milo.agency.
Innovative content.
Buckle up today because we've got a lot of car news. Ford Motor Company says it plans to eliminate 500 salaried positions in the U.S. this week. That's part of 7,000 salaried positions the automaker plans to cut by the end of August, including a total of 800 here in the U.S. And that figure also represents about 10% of Ford's global workforce. It includes people who took buyouts from the company late last year, involuntary layoffs, and open positions that won't be filled. Ford CEO Jim Hackett told employees about the layoffs in a Monday morning email, saying the company was entering the final round of job cuts. In a break from past precedent, Ford is allowing affected employees a few days to wrap things up and say goodbye to coworkers before leaving. The Detroit News reports the automaker is slashing positions in Europe, China, South America, and other regions. Under Hackett, Ford is aiming to flatten the organization by removing layers of bureaucracy and giving managers more power to make decisions. The goal is to speed up decision-making and cut costs. Ford is targeting savings of more than $25 billion by 2022.
Sven, you do a lot of auto writing. What do you think about this? Good move?
Well, I don't know if it's a good move. You know, they've been promising this for a long time. I mean, it's been, I think, a couple years almost now since they first announced that they were going to be, contracting, and Wall Street investors have been really clamoring for more details. I think a lot of the employees, too, will probably grumble about how this has been sort of hanging over them like a cloud for a long time. But, I mean, look, a lot of companies are doing this. It's, auto sales are starting to slow down. I think the forecast is for more of the same of that. And, in the meantime, they've got to put a lot of money down on electric vehicles and self-driving cars. So times are changing. And every automaker is kind of going through that. You're seeing the same thing happening at General Motors across town.
Dan Gilbert has reportedly grown impatient with legislative efforts to reform Michigan's no-fault auto insurance system and is preparing to launch a petition drive. Detroit News opinion editor Nolan Finley broke the news over the weekend. Gilbert is preparing to gather signatures for a proposal that tracks closely with the bills recently passed by the Republican-led state House and Senate. They would allow drivers to choose various levels of coverage, or none at all. Governor Gretchen Whitmer has said she'll veto those bills as they currently stand. She wants a requirement that drivers carry a minimum level of medical coverage. She also wants to crack down on insurers' ability to include factors like zip code and credit scores in setting rates as a way to lower premiums. Gilbert would need to collect 340,000 signatures over 6 months across the state. It could become law with a simple majority vote, cutting out the governor and her fellow Democrats altogether. If lawmakers don't approve the measure, voters would see it on the statewide ballot in 2020.
So, Jerry, we should point out once again, just to level set here, Michigan has the highest auto insurance rates in the country, and Detroit's the highest in Michigan. Michigan is also the only state that requires that every driver carry unlimited lifetime medical coverage on their insurance policies.
Yeah, it is a lot of weight for people to carry, but it's also, time and time again, it's been something that people have said that they don't want to get rid of.
Also, I can't wait till Dan Gilbert comes up to me in the parking lot of the grocery store and asks me to sign the petition.
I mean,
I'm really looking forward to that.
That would be pretty funny, wouldn't it? But you know what? I put nothing past him. I could see him doing that. And here's the thing, though. It's an easy task. Here's something a little behind the curtain stuff, like how the sausage is made, that I kind of want to share with people. Getting petitions is actually pretty easy in this state.
If you have money.
Yeah, if you've got the money. Because in reality, with a few notable exceptions, one of them being the gerrymandering proposal, petition gatherers are paid. That's a job that people hire. And if you just keep putting the petition worker out there long enough, you will get the signatures you need. Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to note was I find myself agreeing with Mitch Albom, which I don't always do.
That should be a headline on our website.
But he made a good point, and it's around the idea that we need to slow down a little bit with this. This whole thing has moved. I think there was some quote that more progress has happened in the last 4 years, in the last 4 days, in the last 4 years or something like that around this topic.
Right, yeah.
And when things move quickly, and we talked about this last week for another thing, when things move quickly, people move fast and they break things. And
insurance Michigan's no-fault insurance is a very complicated topic. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot that we don't know, as our friends at Michigan Auto Law have told us on many occasions. There are things we don't understand about how insurance rates are set because there's no transparency.
My fear with this is that we're going to put in the system because, look, I hear listeners. I get it. At this point, people are so near the breaking point that they don't care how this savings happens.
Right. They're just impatient for change.
Right. Because this is affecting people's budget on a big basis. If you're inside the city of Detroit, you're probably paying $300 to $400 more a month than your suburban counterparts. Than the suburbs, you're looking at, a couple $100 a month or a little bit less than that. That's coming out of your bills every single month. And then you go ahead and look at things like we've got these roads that we need to get fixed down the line. And that might be a tax rise as well. People are look, Michiganders don't have that much money. They just, the average Michigander doesn't have that much extra money to spread around.
Yeah. So one thing I want to add here is, and you mentioned the quote, this was from in Sunday's Detroit News story. It was a follow-up to Nolan Finley's original report from Governor Whitmer's spokesman, who said there's been more progress made in the last 4 days than the last 4 years. He's talking about discussions with Republicans over a reform package. If that's true, then what it suggests to me is that, look, Whitmer's not going to want to be upstaged by Dan Gilbert or anyone, frankly. So does she use this to kind of push negotiations along and sort of try to beat Gilbert to the punch here and say, look, go to the Republicans and say, look, okay, we're not that far away on a lot of things. I think even Republicans are acknowledging that, there are areas where we totally agree. Maybe she uses this to kind of all right, there's now urgency. I don't think any of us want to start turning over legislating to a billionaire, essentially.
But that billionaire is very serious. I mean,
he's very powerful, too.
And if you remember, we actually had the Vice President of Governmental Affairs on this very show talking about this months ago. So they are aligned on this. They've got this issue in their sights. I think the legislature would be and the governor would be very smart to do something, because I feel like if they don't do something, I think everyone knows Gilbert will win this.
If you're listening to this episode in your car, take note. Our friends over at Michigan Auto Law, that's the second reference to them in this single episode, they're out with their new annual list of the most dangerous intersections in the state. They base this list on 2018 crash data from the Michigan State Police. And the most dangerous intersection in Michigan is Telegraph and 12 Mile in Southfield. It had 145 crashes and 24 injuries last year. And I'll round out the top 5 here. Orchard Lake at 14 Mile, Van Dyke and 18.5 Mile in Sterling Heights, M5 at Pontiac Trail in Commerce Township, and the I-75 interchange at Big Beaver in Troy. All right, Jared, the one thing that jumps out at me right away is that I think 3 of these are actually roundabouts.
We don't understand roundabouts in Michigan. We just don't.
In the United States, I would probably venture to guess.
Yeah, they're not a thing here.
But these intersections all, I think I'm familiar with most of them at least. They're all like a mess, and they're in places where there is way more traffic than the area is equipped to handle. Detroit was built with these big broad streets and a grid pattern, take away the idea of car culture altogether. But traffic can move fairly efficiently here. But out there, it's like, I actually just was out M5 and Pontiac Trail, and I don't know how people can do the commute from, assuming they're working downtown or somewhere, far east or whatever. I don't know how they could do that commute every day, because it is miserable. I drove it during rush hour the other day. My son had a soccer game up in Holly. I live in Ferndale. Google navigation drove me that way because I-75 is under construction, but it was a mess.
If I wanted to make a clickbait headline, I'd say it's dangerous to drive in the suburbs.
It kind of is, and it's no fun. I mean, especially out there in the west side, like of Oakland County, where it's all lakes and everything, and it's like 2-lane roads that curve around everywhere and everything. I mean, it's just an absolute mess. We'll put a link to the full list of 20 most dangerous intersections in Michigan. They're all here in Southeast Michigan on dailydetroit.com.
A research and development center led by the University of Michigan may be coming to Detroit. Cranes is reporting that, well, you can guess who, Dan Gilbert and real estate tycoon Stephen Ross are considering a manufacturing R&D facility at the site of the old fail jail at I-375 in Gratiot. This is on the heels of the university saying that they'd like to expand their physical presence in the city. A little fun fact, U of M was started in the city of Detroit. Ross has also donated more than $300 million to U of M, and the business school is named for him. Of course, and it's kind of interesting, we'll link to the full story in the show notes with some juicy sleuthing details. And I got to say, a local reporter is checking out airplane logs, like landing and takeoff logs. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. When is the name of this city going to change to Dantroit?
No doubt Dan's always busy. But what do we think about this, Sven? I know that you're a U of M grad. We've talked a little bit about the impact that U of M has made to the Ann Arbor community, how it's been a really big engine. Could that be beneficial to Detroit?
Well, sure. I mean, you've seen U of M get more involved over time here in Detroit. Anecdotally, they're incorporating into a lot of their curriculum, I think, at the school, sending students in the summers and during class time, fall and winter as part of, curriculum and internships and so forth, which I think is a great thing. I don't remember hearing or seeing that much about that back when I was in undergraduate there back in the 90s. So it's a good thing. I mean, we'll see if this comes to fruition. There's not a lot of details about, a manufacturing R&D center.
Still early days, yeah.
Or how it would work, what kinds of stuff it would do. But hey, the more the merrier.
But what about that as opposed to, say, a residential thing? Or would that be something that could be comboed or student housing? Or, I mean, there's a lot of ways this could go.
It's interesting, too, because in manufacturing R&D, you don't typically think about something like that in a central business district. Manufacturing has typically, gone out to green fields, where they can have a lot of land for essentially sprawling one-story developments. But, so we'll see. A pair of hotels operating under the Marriott parent brand could be coming to Livonia. Both are familiar names operating hotels in downtown Detroit. Hometown Life reports that Livonia's Planning Commission has recommended the approval of an Aloft and Element Hotel at a proposed 6-story building near 7 Mile and I-275. The two hotels would have a combined 218 rooms. They would open on the site of a former sports bar that closed last fall. Aloft operates a boutique hotel inside the David Whitney building in Detroit. Element is an extended stay hotel that operates a location at the recently reopened Metropolitan building downtown. The hotel proposal now goes to Livonia's city council.
I don't think any of their bars will be as cool as the Element downtown, though.
No, probably not. You talked all about that on a recent episode.
Madonna University is continuing to grow its campus. A new Welcome Center and Felician Sisters Heritage Center broke ground over the weekend. The 28,000 square foot building off of Schoolcraft will have a great room that can hold 400 people, a cafe, gallery, and offices for the admissions and advancement departments. The archives for the Felician Sisters will be in the lower level. The $9 million project should be wrapped up in 2021. In the past few years, the private for-profit Catholic University has built new student housing and purchased additional land, among other projects.
Royal Oak really wants you to try out their new parking decks. In June, the city of Royal Oak will offer free parking Thursdays through Sundays in the downtown parking garages. Pedicabs are being added to downtown to help people get around. Those are the carts you can ride in that are pulled by a bicycle. The city's newest parking garage, clocking in at nearly 600 spaces, is expected to open June 1st. This is all tied to the new Civic Center and City Hall project. We talked all about that on an earlier episode with Royal Oak's Economic Development Manager, Todd Fenton. We'll link to that episode in the show notes.
Sven, we see these garages a lot because maybe once a week, something like that, we're up at the podcast Detroit Royal Oak studios.
Plus, they're tall.
They're very tall. And sometimes one of our favorite places is the Office Coffee Shop to write the show.
Holla.
Great little place. But there are parking garages around, and it's hundreds of spaces always on the signs. And yet I always hear how it's so hard to park in Royal Oak, but we just park in the garage for free for 2 hours. I
never have a hard time parking in Royal Oak.
I'm
not there on Saturday nights very often, mind you, but
it goes to show, it blows my mind how a parking garage can be right around the corner from someplace and people will not use it.
People either don't like parking in garages because then you actually have to walk a little bit more. You got to navigate stairs or go walk up to the elevator or whatever. Or it's just a thing of creatures of habit. They just you took away my surface parking space. Now I don't know what to do. I don't know. Before we go, wanted to take a quick moment to thank our newest patrons. Both Roger and Anthony have joined us on our Patreon site to support the show. For that, we are eternally grateful. Thanks so much, Roger and Anthony. We love you. I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Jer Stays. Ditto on that. Thanks, guys. For everyone else listening, take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.
You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.